The Haunting of the Summer Cabin. In the blistering heat of July, three close friends, Maya, Liam, and Zoe, decided to escape the bustle of city life for a week at Maya's family cabin, tucked deep in the shadowy woods of the Pacific Northwest. The cabin, a rustic wooden structure, had stood the test of time for over a century. It had been passed down through generations, each one adding to the stories and mysteries that surrounded it. As they drove deeper into the forest, the towering pines seemed to close in around them, blocking out the sun. The cabin appeared suddenly, as if it had been waiting for them. It was quaint and charming by day, with wildflowers growing along the stone path and a small creek babbling nearby. But locals whispered that when the sun dipped below the horizon, the cabin took on a different character entirely. Rumors of ghostly apparitions, disembodied voices, and objects moving on their own were common among those who dared to speak of it. The first evening was uneventful. The three friends set up camp, roasted marshmallows over a bonfire, and shared ghost stories under the stars. As they laughed and teased each other, the surrounding woods remained silent, almost too silent. The occasional crackle of the fire was the only sound that broke the heavy stillness of the night. Just after midnight, an unexpected chill swept through the clearing, causing the flames to flicker violently before extinguishing altogether. Startled, the trio looked around, but the night was pitch black, and the forest loomed ominously around them. Zoe shrugged it off as a sudden gust of wind, and they all agreed it was time to retreat to the safety of the cabin. But once inside, the atmosphere shifted. What had been cozy now felt stifling. The wooden beams creaked and groaned, as if the cabin itself was alive. The friends tried to shake off their unease, attributing the sounds to the age of the structure, but as they settled into their beds, the noises grew louder. It started with faint footsteps echoing down the hallway, then the distinct sound of doors creaking open and slamming shut. Liam, the skeptic, was the first to dismiss the noises as nothing more than the house settling. But when he decided to investigate, the temperature dropped sharply as he approached the door. As he turned the doorknob, a cold hand seemed to brush against his arm. He jumped back, heart racing, but when he looked around, there was nothing, just the dark hallway stretching out before him. Ignoring the uneasy feeling growing in his gut, Liam called out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" His voice echoed through the empty space, met only with silence. But as he turned to go back to the room, he heard a faint whisper right next to his ear, a voice that wasn't his own. It was too soft to make out the words, but it sent a shiver down his spine. Meanwhile, back in the room, Maya and Zoe huddled together, eyes wide as they listened to the strange noises outside their door. Suddenly, the air around them grew thick, and the temperature plummeted. The bed began to shake violently as if something unseen was trying to throw them off. Terrified, Maya grabbed Zoe's hand, and they both bolted out of the room, nearly colliding with Liam in the hallway. The three of them stood frozen in the darkness, breathing heavily as the cabin seemed to close in around them. The noises intensified, whispers, footsteps, and the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. But there was no one there, no physical presence they could see or touch. Without a word, they grabbed their things and fled the cabin, not stopping until they reached their car. As they drove away, the cabin's windows seemed to glow with an unnatural light, as if something was watching them leave. They never spoke of that night again, but the memory of the cold, unwelcoming presence in that cabin stayed with them forever. Maya's family sold the cabin soon after, and it's said that the new owners left after just one night, too terrified to return. The Phantom of the Lake. At the edge of a small, sleepy town in the Midwest, there's a lake known for its crystal-clear waters and serene beauty. Locals often spent their summers there, swimming, fishing, and enjoying the peaceful surroundings. But beneath its calm surface lay a dark secret, one that few dared to speak of. The legend of the Phantom of the Lake began decades ago, when a young couple drowned under mysterious circumstances. They had been out on a small boat, enjoying a warm summer evening, when a sudden storm rolled in. The boat capsized, and despite being strong swimmers, both of them were pulled under the water by an unseen force. Their bodies were found days later, locked in an embrace, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. Since that day, strange things began happening around the lake. Swimmers would feel a sudden, icy grip on their ankles, as if something was trying to pull them under. Fishermen reported seeing a pale figure standing on the shore, watching them with hollow eyes, only to disappear when they approached. One summer, a group of teenagers decided to spend a night camping by the lake. They had heard the stories, but like most, they didn't believe them. As they sat around their campfire, the lake was eerily still, the only sound the occasional splash of a fish breaking the surface. As the night wore on, they began to hear faint whispers, carried on the wind from across the water. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, but when they looked around, there was no one there. The air grew thick with fog, and the temperature dropped sharply, causing them to shiver despite the warmth of the fire. Suddenly, the water began to ripple, and a figure emerged from the mist. It was a woman, her long hair dripping wet, her eyes hollow and dark. She walked towards them, her feet barely touching the ground. The teens were frozen in place, too terrified to move as she approached. Without warning, the fire went out, plunging them into darkness. When the light of the moon returned, the woman was gone, but the air was filled with the sound of desperate, gasping breaths, as if someone was drowning right in front of them. Panicked, they grabbed their things and fled, leaving their tents and belongings behind. The next morning, the local authorities found their campsite abandoned. The tents were torn to shreds, and the ground was soaked, as if it had rained all night, though the sky had been clear. The teens were found wandering the roads, dazed and disoriented, unable to explain what had happened. Since that night, no one has dared to camp by the lake, and the locals warn visitors to stay away after dark. The phantom of the lake is still said to haunt those waters, waiting for her next victim. The Hitchhiker of Highway 87. Highway 87, stretching through the desolate deserts of Arizona, is known for its long, lonely stretches of road where drivers can go miles without seeing another car. It's the perfect setting for tales of ghostly apparitions, but one story in particular has been passed down for generations, the story of the hitchhiker. It was a hot summer night when a trucker named Dave was making his way down Highway 87. The sun had set hours ago, and the road was pitch black, illuminated only by the beams of his headlights. As he drove, he saw a figure standing by the side of the road, thumbing for a ride. It was a young woman, dressed in a white dress that seemed out of place in the middle of the desert. Feeling sorry for her, Dave pulled over and offered her a ride. She thanked him and climbed into the passenger seat, her face pale and her hands trembling. She told him she was heading to the next town, but as they drove, she grew silent, staring out the window as if lost in thought. After a few miles, Dave noticed that the air inside the truck had grown cold, so cold that he could see his breath. He glanced over at the woman, but she was gone. Panicked, he pulled over and searched the truck, but there was no sign of her. The passenger seat was empty, and the door was still locked. Shaken, Dave continued driving, his mind racing with what had just happened. As he approached the next town, he saw the woman again, standing by the side of the road, just as he had seen her before. This time, he didn't stop. He sped past her, heart pounding in his chest, but as he glanced in the rearview mirror, she was gone. When he reached the town, he stopped at a diner to collect himself. He mentioned the hitchhiker to the waitress, who went pale at his words. She told him that the woman he had seen was the ghost of a young bride who had been killed in a car accident on her wedding night, years ago. She had been trying to hitchhike to her wedding, but never made it. Since then, she had been seen by countless drivers on that stretch of highway, always disappearing before reaching her destination. Dave never drove that route again at night, and to this day, drivers on Highway 87 report seeing the ghostly hitchhiker, still trying to find her way home.